Well, thanks to Steph for a fine introduction of a person I didn't really recognize. I've been thinking about, and there will be a slide at the end from a longer quote from Lamott, and part of it says, when you're aware of all that you've been given in your lifetime and in the last few days, it's hard not to be humbled. And that's how I'm going to start. I think about all that I've been given in my lifetime and in the last few days, and it's hard not to be humbled. Okay, this came about because I thought that my colleagues who have already retired should do this sort of talk. and tried to talk them into it, and nobody said, "Oh, that's a great idea, Dan. I can do that kind of talk." And so somehow when you say something's a great idea and that other people should do it, and then when it's your turn, it seems kind of unethical to say, "Oh, gotta wash my hair that night." So what I've tried to do is pick out just a few things I've learned. So we're going to do 6 things I've learned over this now kind of long career. And the first thing to say is, as I think about my career, it's about us. It's not about me. So this is a pie chart. I told the kids I would have a pie chart. And so that little blue slice is the proportion of my publications that I wrote all by myself. And the yellow slices are ones that I've written with others. And so really my work has been based on the ideas of other people. We're all standing on the shoulders of other people, working together. And so, there should be a whole group of people up here talking, not just that little blue slice. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is I want to talk about poverty. Very early in my career, I was based in Washington, working for the Health and Human Services and in their planning and evaluation unit. And one of the first tasks that I got in this postdoc was to help them think about whether benefits were adequate in the Supplemental Security Income, the SSI program. The SSI is a program for low-income elders and people with disabilities. And so they were doing a review 20 years after it had started to see if they thought various aspects were working the way they should, and they asked us to help them think about whether benefits were adequate. And a colleague and I wrote a piece, and it came out in the Gerontologist, and it's filled with pages like this. Numbers. I am kind of a quant guy, and so that doesn't surprise you that if somebody asks me whether benefits are adequate, I'm going to think about the amount of benefits you get compared to lots of different numerical things and write an article about it. But one of the things we did was we also took testimony. And a piece of testimony is one I'd like to read you just some selections of. Are benefits adequate? You've got to be kidding. In Montana, we get $407 per month. Let's talk about what that means in personal terms. I have federal subsidized housing, which I waited for 5 years to get. I still don't have heat in my apartment because I'm afraid to complain. If I lost this place, I'd be homeless because I can't save enough for a deposit, and it would be virtually impossible to find a place I could afford. The place is really only one room, kitchen and living room, both small, connected. It does have a shower. I take cold showers whenever possible to avoid a higher utility bill. Oh, yes, and I steal toilet paper and soap from public buildings whenever I can. I budget from month to month, trying to decide what I absolutely need versus what would simply give me a more optimistic outlook on life. I'll have to wait until October 1st now to pick up more roach baits, chlorine bleach, and disinfectant spray. I'm down to 78 cents now, which isn't so bad. I'm getting darn good at this budgeting stuff. When I see a penny on the street, I pick it up. In fact, I have recurring dreams that I'm walking down the street and I see a quarter. And I lean down to pick it up. And as I do so, lo and behold, there's another and another over there and there and there, quarters. Are benefits adequate? You've got to be kidding. So that story has stuck with me for the last 30 years because what I do is quantitative empirical research. And behind those numbers are stories like that. And I need to remember that. And remembering that makes my work better. Poverty. It's not just about the numbers. I get to say one thing about families. So families are more complex than I knew when I started. So I started my career primarily interested in single-parent families and their children. This comes from a value commitment, a long-standing spiritual tradition towards care for widows and orphans. And this is a story of Dan awakening to complexity. So here I am, originally focused on single mothers and children. You see the family that I had in my head at the time, and then the split. And finally, over the years, I began to see that one way it's more complicated is people don't stay in that top row. So here's the father went on to repartner and to have another kid, and the mother went on to repartner and to have another kid. So this repartnering and new fertility actually creates problems for the kind of social policy that we had designed for that top family. And coming to understand that has been important for me. The next thing I want to say is it's not this separation here at the top. So an increasing number of families that split, the child is living substantial amounts of time, maybe even half time, with both parents. And we don't really know how to handle that. So here's this is the only graph like this that I'm going to show you. Okay. So this, we have collected data from divorces in Wisconsin for the last 40 years. And students mostly, without whom I could not do my own work, have gone to courthouses in the early days and looked through a divorce file and written down kind of what they saw and what the outcome of the divorce was. And so 1989 is my last year of the PhD program, and that's the bar on the far left, and the pink part is a divorce decree where kids went to live with mom most of the time, and the little blue part is where kids went to live with dad most of the time, and the yellow-greeny parts in the middle are kids who spent substantial amounts of time with both. The darker green, 50-50, the little yellow, more like 1/3, 2/3. So we were right in 1989 to think that when families split, mostly kids stayed with their mothers. If I were technologically sophisticated, now I'd push a button and this would go shoo, like this, and you would see the decline in kids who live primarily with their mothers. So this is only 20 years. This data only goes through 2010. More recent data shows the same stuff. See how big the green's gotten? In fact, the green and yellow now are bigger than the pink. So when we think about divorces now, we need to think not about kids living with their mom. We need to think about kids living with their mom and with their dad. And it turns out that our social policies have not kept up with this. So those of you who know something about the way social policy works, lots of benefits have schedules in them where the number of kids you have determines how much you get or whether you're eligible. Well, we don't count half kids or 0.4 or 0.6, right? Our social policy has not yet come to grips with this sort of fluid situation for kids, and we need to do something about that. I've spent some time trying to do that. Okay, I have a couple slides to talk about social policy. So the main thing I want to say is we can't have it all. I think early in my career I started out thinking there were some policies that were clearly better than alternatives. And maybe there are some clearly better than alternatives, but mostly we live in a world of trade-offs. So this is a pretty standard approach to the policy process. You start in that gray box there, identifying some issue, deciding that it's an issue that we're going to deal with through policy rather than just leave individuals to fend for themselves. Then there's a generation of some alternative approaches and evaluating of those approaches. One gets picked, it gets implemented, then there's an evaluation. You sort of hope that after that evaluation, either we decide it's doing well and we can keep it, or you decide we have to generate some alternatives, new alternatives, or we learn something about what those alternatives might be like, or we pick something different. Most of my career has been spent trying to address a variety of issues on this chart. And I thought that the selection was the key step, and I've ended up spending most of my career in the evaluation, in the identification of issues, in the realizing we did it wrong and have to start over. I'll just give you one example about what I mean by trade-offs here. So many of you know that much of my work has focused on child support. So think back to those families separating and trying to figure out how to identify an appropriate amount that the person who the kid doesn't live with pays for the kid's upkeep. So we can talk about dads and moms because that's still mostly the situation, although I hope you remember blue, green, and pink. All right, so here we have trying to figure out how much we should transfer from mostly dads to mostly moms and kids. And it's kind of a thorny problem, and one that I haven't figured out yet after 35 years. One of the things we know is that what we're doing now doesn't work very well, and the amount of unpaid child support right now is over $100 billion. Okay, $100 billion. So here's an idea. Maybe, what if the government guaranteed a certain amount? Said, okay, if you're owed $100 a month, we'll guarantee that you get that $100 a month, and we'll be the ones who go after the payer and try to make that work. And that has some great advantages, and if you've read anything that I've written, you know that I think this is a good idea. But we know from other work that I've done that that would likely lead to some payers saying, now I don't have to pay because my kids will be taken care of anyway. And so here we have what seemed like a winner, now balancing, trading off, trying to figure out, okay, which of these two things that we both want we have to give up on to make the other one work. So that's what I've learned. We can't have it all. We have to make choices that are hard and that rely on our common and shared values, and sometimes that's hard. Okay, that was the wrong way. I realized fairly early that one of the things that would help me with this, that last scheme, was trying to learn from others. And that I needed to get out of the sort of narrow box that I was in thinking about how policies worked and what was possible. And so beginning to think about how other countries do things and how they're working, and then whether that could transfer to us. So those are three very important and distinguishable tasks. What are other countries doing? How's it working? And then could it be transferred to us? And we know very little actually about any of those. So here's a map. Red, countries that I've published something about. Blue, countries that we're working on a paper on right now. So that's why I can't retire quite yet. Because the blue is pretty big. Fortunately, if you think back to the pie, I'm working on this with other people and standing on other people's shoulders and learning from them as we go. And I wanted to say one thing about social work and IRP and learning where our strength lies. So as I think about my career, I remember very early hoping that we built a team that had people on it interested in the same things I was interested in, and working on them in the same way, so I could, work alongside and together with lots of people, and that's been wonderful when we've been able to do that. Some of you know that I've had a successful collaboration with Maria Canchan for years and years and years. But I don't think that's where our strength lies. Dan and other Dans. So you knew there was going to be one little political moment here. So here's a picture that went viral. What do you see in that picture? What's the first thing you notice? White. White, 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 right? So, just to say, I need people around me who approach the world differently, who've had different stories, who have heard different stories, who are willing to tell different stories. This isn't just about race and ethnicity, although it is about race and ethnicity. It's about people I've learned from who come from a different political party. It's about people I've learned from who approach the world through systematically listening to stories. It's about people I've learned from who are interested in vastly different things than I'm interested in. That's one of the beauties of social work, is it's under a big umbrella. Okay, summary. 1, it's about us, it's not about me. That was the pie. Poverty is not just about the numbers, it's about the people and the stories underneath them. Family's more complex than I knew. Policy, we can't have it all. We need to learn from others, and then learning that our strength lies in a broad and diverse group of scholars. When I think about that, I'm really grateful for the career I've had and the life I've had. So what an amazing thing. Some of you got a chance to meet some of my kids and grandkids. And without their love and support, I wouldn't probably be here talking. There are folks in this room who have always wondered what I did. Friends And it's been important for me to know people and to hear stories from people outside of social work and outside, especially outside of the academy. Thank you. There's people here who have been my teachers, formally or informally, and my students who really belong in that last category, because they've taught me as we've done the journey of learning together, and I've really appreciated the things that you've brought into my life in ways that you've taught me. I wanted to close with some words from Anne Lamott's. This is a book of hers called Help, Thanks, Wow. Gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. It means you're willing to stop being such a jerk. When you're aware of all that has been given to you in your lifetime and in the past few days, it's hard not to be humbled and pleased to give back. Most humbling of all is to comprehend the life-saving gift that your pit crew of people has been for you. And all the experiences you have shared, the journeys together, the collaborations, births and deaths, divorces, rehab and vacations, the solidarity you have shown one another. Every so often you realize that without all of them, your life would be barren and pathetic. It would be death of a salesman, but with emails and texting. The marvel is only partly that somehow you lured them into your web 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and they totally stuck with you. The more astonishing thing is that these greatest of all possible people feel the same way about you, horrible, grim, self-obsessed you. You could almost flush with appreciation. What a great scam to have gotten people of such extreme quality and loyalty to think you are stuck with them. Oh God, thank you.